This is a complete collection of the works of Winston Churchill, all in first edition. My name is Pom Harrington and I'm the owner of Peter Harrington. So back in the 70s, Bainton Riviere, binder down in Bath, collected together all the works of Winston Churchill, in total 20 works, and they bound them uniformly like this in a half blue Morocco binding, in total 47 volumes, starting from his first book, The Malakand Field Force, all the way through to the English-speaking people. If we go to the beginning, The Malakand Field Force was his first publication in 1898 and covers his observations of the army on the frontier war in northwest India. As an army campaigner and a journalist, he went to Africa, and actually that strongly influenced his early books. And his next great book really was The River War, published in 2 thumping big volumes, published like 1,000 copies, I believe. He continued to write other books, London's Ladysmith, Ian Hamilton's March, which is also based in Africa. But during that time period, he also found time to write his first novel, which is Savrola. He wasn't very proud of this novel and didn't really like it very much, and he was never to write any other fiction again. He moved on, and after his African adventures, to write the biography about his father, Lord Randolph Churchill, and published in 2 volumes. From there, he moved on to back to Africa, which he was writing My African Journey, and which was published in 1908. His next book was The Liberal and Social Problems. I mean, this is where he becomes a politician. He was a liberal, and this book represents really his first political thought in a book, and quite strong influence, a change of life. He was obviously involved in this First World War, and actually he would then write the histories of the First World War, which is the World Crisis. It was published in 6 volumes and commercially quite successful. Includes his account of Gallipoli, which was actually one of his great disasters as a war leader or being involved, but a very important book, and actually considered to be one of the better histories of the First World War. After the war, he then wrote 2 autobiographies, his first one being his early life, and he followed that up with Thoughts and Adventures, which are basically just short chapters on people and experience he had later on in life. He, after his autobiography, decided to write the history of his family history, which is Marlborough. Marlborough was published, and by this point, Churchill really did have a lavish lifestyle, and he was very good at spending money and always needed money. And Marlborough really was actually a financial aid to him. He was advanced a lot of money by Harrop, the publishers, and they published these 4 very grand volumes for the history of his ancestors. By this stage, the rise of Hitler was happening. Down here we have the Arms and the Covenant. I mean, by this stage, Hitler is recognising the rise of the Nazis. It was worrying him. And he was basically promoting the fact that the Britons should be prepared and should be arming themselves, because the others are. He also had a bi-weekly column in the Evening Standard, which was basically written from 1936 to 1939. And he was really warning then that the Nazis were coming, and it actually was an important piece of, not quite propaganda, but it was picked up by a guy called Emery Revesh, who was to become his literary agent. And Revesh actually organised this publication to be translated and published all over Europe. And this book actually is all those bi-weekly columns of the 3 years then published together, because Churchill had been predicting this was going to happen. It was a very important part of why he became wartime leader, because he's the only person who recognised the problem. During the war, he was obviously very busy, and he really didn't publish a great deal, but he was always short of money, as I said before, and he found a lovely little ruse on tax, which in today's terms I think politicians would find a little bit difficult to get away with. But essentially, taxes were extremely high during the Second World War. But if you wrote speeches and published speeches, there was no tax. And so Winston Churchill, who was a rather good writer of speeches, decided to start publishing his war speeches, which started with Into Battle, and he kept publishing those through the war, and it provided with him a very nice income. After the war, Revesh, who was a literary agent, pretty much begged him to write an authoritative history of the Second World War. He was best placed to do so. And he actually secured him a $1.4 million advance from the American publishers, Charles Scribner, to publish it over there first. But with that advance, he became a very rich man. And from 1948 to 1954, every year, a volume came out of the Second World War. It was published throughout the world, with Revesh also making himself a very wealthy man as his agent, selling all the foreign translations. It became absolutely the definitive account of the Second World War. Churchill famously said that he was very intent that history should treat him well, and the reason why history would treat him well is that he was very intent on writing it. It was written by a syndicate of by historians, and Churchill really was an editor of that, and he was extremely good at it. And they then used a team of secretaries to sort of type it all up, and hence the high volume production of these huge numbers of books coming out in such a space of time. The war speeches continued, and after the war had finished, he did the post-war speeches, 5 volumes, Why Break a Commercial Success. So in total, you have all 12 volumes of his speeches, all in first edition. Revesh was not really content to let Churchill sit down with that one, and during the 50s, after he had his second stint as Prime Minister, he had actually written a volume of the history of English-speaking peoples, which he always wanted to publish. Revesh was quite keen to make some more commercial money, and basically encouraged Churchill to sort of puff it out a little bit. And so they actually published it in 4 volumes over 4 years. I think they're charging 21 shillings a pop. It was a huge success, and I think they printed like 250,000 copies in first edition, which is massive numbers. Churchill finally got recognition for his literary success. I mean, he clearly produced an awful lot of books over the years, and with this final work, The English-Speaking Peoples, he actually won the Nobel Prize for Literature, and concluded really what was quite a remarkable career, not just as a famous wartime leader, but as a very famous writer. For more details, more books about Winston Churchill, please look at the Peter Harrington website.